Give people a minute to get connected. All right. Hello, welcome everyone to the March 17th Portland Clean Energy Fund Grant Committee meeting. We're going to start our meeting by going over some virtual participation guidelines. Committee meetings are open to the public. The slide says committee is invited to comment at 5:35, but that's a little bit of the time is that time is from an old slide. It's going to be in just a few minutes here after we get through with the opening and the introductions. So the chat box is open, and for members of the public, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself in the chat box, you can put your name in there. If you have an organizational affiliation that you want to share, and if you have gender pronouns that you'd like to share, go ahead and put those into the chat box. And if you do want to provide public comment at tonight's meeting, go ahead and indicate that in the chat box as well. This meeting is being recorded, and it's also being live streamed on YouTube, where it can be viewed later on PCEF's YouTube page, which you can access through our website. We do ask that during the meeting, the raise hand function and the chat box be limited to just staff who are participating in the meeting and to committee members. But again, for right now, if you want to use that, if you're a member of the public, to go ahead and indicate if you want to provide public comment and introduce yourself there, that would be great. We usually have closed captioning available. I don't believe I've seen our captioner come online yet, so we might not have that available at this meeting, but the recording does have transcription in it. We're going to start the meeting before we do introductions with a little opening inspiration, and I'm going to ask Sam to provide that for us tonight.
Okay, wanted to just change things up again. It's good to see you all here this evening. I've got a poem here that I've pulled up from Lucille Clifton, who was an African-American poet, writer, educator from Buffalo, New York, and often emphasized in her work, emphasized endurance and strength through adversity, particularly for Black women. So start there. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and women, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my hand holding tight, my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed.
Thanks, Sam. We're going to start introductions. We'll start with committee members, and then we'll move on to staff who are present at the meeting, and then I'll ask Sam to introduce folks who have, members of the public who have put their names into the chat box. So we'll start with Faith.
Good evening, all. Faith Graham, committee member. Nice to see you.
Maria.
Hi, everyone. Maria Sabin, she or they pronouns, committee member.
Megan.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Megan Horst, she, her, committee member, co-chair.
Francis.
Happy Thursday, everyone. Ranfis Genetino Vittoro, he, him pronouns, committee member.
I see Robin just logged on. Robin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy St. Paddy's Day. Sorry, I'm not wearing green. Robin Wang, PCEF committee member.
Thanks, Robin. And Michael is going to be joining us. He's just going to be a few minutes late, and Jeffrey and Shanice are our committee members who are excused this evening. So we'll move on to staff, and we'll start with James.
Hi, great to see everybody tonight. James Valdez, he, him pronouns, and PCEF staff, and also your tech lead for tonight, if you have any technical issues.
Angela.
Angela Prividelli, PCEF staff, and I will be presenting on mini grants tonight.
Megan?
Good evening, Megan Reed, she, her pronouns. I am the Public Information Manager for BPS and am leading media relations for PCEF.
Janet?
Good evening, folks. Janet Hammer, she, her pronouns, and PCEF staff, just your scribe this evening.
Thanks, Janet. And I'm Katie Lister. I'm PCEF staff, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm going to pass it over to Sam.
Okay. Hi, folks. Sam Brasso here, he, him, PCEF staff. And with us in the public, we've got, work our way back here, we've got David Snyder, he, him, previously requested opportunity for public comment. Thank you. We've got Jenny Hall here with us, she, her, from Energy Trust of Oregon Solar Program. And we've got Barbara Bird here, retired union educator. Hi, Barbara, from the Oregon Blue Green and also with the Oregon Blue Green Alliance. Okay.
Great. Thank you. So with that, I think we have one person, David Snyder, who has indicated a desire to provide public comment. David, I'd invite you to, if you want to turn your camera on and unmute yourself, you can go ahead and provide your comment now.
Thank you. My name is David Snyder, he, him. I live in the Piedmont neighborhood. I started watching these meetings earlier this year, tried to read up on the Clean Energy Fund and the Climate Emergency Declaration. Because I'm new to this, I recognize that my understanding might not be accurate, but even so, I'd like to make a couple of comments. First, I've been really impressed by the thoughtfulness and sincerity and the integrity of the members of the committee in the meetings I've had the chance to watch. I've also been impressed by the information and guidance offered by the city staff. When I started looking into this, I was surprised that more of PCEF's funds had not yet been distributed, but then I started to see the importance and difficulty of making sure the funds were distributed consistent with the terms of the 2018 initiative petition. I wondered what the hang-up was, if there is a hang-up. I heard references to the 5% limit on admin expenses, but when I read the ordinance, I saw that the limit was waived through June of this year. If more staff would help move this forward and get the funds put into action, why not ask the City Council to extend that waiver through June of 2024, hire more staff needed to evaluate and process grant applications, respond to the audit, get this moving forward. And I don't mean to be implicitly criticizing all the hard work and progress that's been made when I say that. I get the intention of limiting administrative expenditures, but in the short run, if hiring more staff would get PCEF funds out and benefiting our community, let's make that happen. I also wanted to comment that I've read recently suggestions, which I think are pretty irresponsible, that PCEF expenditures be frozen, that the approval of grants and expenditures suspended, even suggestions that PCEF funds be used for purposes totally unrelated to climate change, such as property tax mitigation and construction of a new fire training facility. If there wasn't a planetary climate emergency, if there wasn't a history of exploitation of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in this city and in this country, and if PCEF hadn't been created by a citizen initiative that received overwhelming support in 2018, then the recent auditor's report might support a brief pause pending completion of the audit recommendations. Obviously, there is a climate emergency. Obviously, there is a history of racism in our city. Therefore, it's essential that the committee's work proceed with both urgency and appropriate deliberation. The 65% of the voters who supported the creation of the PCEF expect nothing less. Thank you for your hard work. I hope you keep it up. I hope you don't get discouraged by some of the flack that's coming your way. We all know this is important. We've got to keep it moving. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Ranfis?
I just want to appreciate David's comments, and I think just noted, I think just want to echo the statement here that I think this program requires a lot of hands, and it's really labor intensive. And I think this work cannot be done with city staff working on this. So I think noted on the administrative costs, and look forward to your advocacy at the city level on things like that. And I think your comments are noted. And I just want to note that this program is also not possible without community support and community feedback on how we improve the program. So just value you, David, taking your time to come to this committee meeting.
All right, let's move on to the next part of the agenda, which is looking at the agenda. So we're going to have some program updates talking about recruitment and audit follow-up. We are going to have a break today that does include members of the community. So we'll take a 5-minute actual break and then spend 15 minutes in a couple of breakout rooms where members of the community are invited to chat with committee members. Then at 7:20, we'll come back and continue the discussion for a little bit more on audit follow-up. And then at 7:50, we'll have a presentation of the mini grants program evaluation. No decision being asked for tonight, just a presentation, and then closing out the meeting with committee member comments. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam, who is going to lead the discussion, give some program updates and lead the discussion there. And I see that Michael is also joining us now, so just want to note that. Michael Edenhill, who is our committee member.
Thank you, Katie. So I'm going to start with just a few high-level program updates, and then we're going to get into the audit coverage and some of our next steps there, as well as in how that connects to some of the structural change considerations, conversations that we are going to have as a committee and as a program. So one, the recruitment, our recruitment efforts are still ongoing. We have our admin specialist is going to be starting up with the program in mid-March, and we've got several other recruitments that are further along in the process. And so we're excited to soon be bringing on more folks. And so that is a consistent and active effort. And we're honing in the time that it takes. It is intensive to recruit as well. But I'm just excited to announce that we've got at least our admin specialist coming on board, and we're working through our recruitments for a clean energy project manager soon. We're in the process of working through that, as well as a community engagement support position. Before I jump into the audit coverage, I just wanted to state some for the public at large. Is that one, our grants are still active. We are still moving forward with the selection of our next round of grantees from our second request for proposals. And we're chugging along. So there's been a lot of, certainly it is fair to say a lot of media distraction, and it is just a distraction at this moment. But we're going to jump into that. And so I want to just, and so I guess let's maybe, before talking about some of the next steps, which the next slides will do, I'm going to go ahead and flag one more thing. We're also working through our heat response program. It's exciting that we've already secured about 1,200 units and are on our way and working to secure 3,000, ideally up to 3,000 units to disperse this summer. So we are moving along and doing the good work of the program, and our projects are well underway. And we're seeing our projects from our first cycle of grants, our inaugural cycle, just starting to come underway. And so you're going to start to see those stories come out. I had the fortune of going to Portland Community Reinvestment Initiative's kickoff a couple of weeks back, where a bunch of folks showed up for their first project. So a lot of exciting things to come. But I think it's fair to say we've had a lot of unfavorable coverage lately. And so I think I wanted to give the floor to Megan. Megan, I don't know if you feel comfortable jumping in now and starting to chat about whether our audit coverage, or if, and just I want to acknowledge Megan is here to talk about our audit coverage or respond to any questions you all have, but I wanted to give the floor to you all so you all can share your reflections on our audit coverage. So I didn't have sort of a role, but I want to make sure Megan's here so Megan can answer your questions. And I know there's probably a lot of thoughts within the committee around our coverage too.
Yes, thank you, Sam. So I will just give a kind of a brief overview over media coverage over the last week, but I would really love to hear the committee's opinions and thoughts around what we've seen over the last week. I would say has been kind of a few different things hitting differently. So for those of you I have not had the pleasure of speaking with yet, again, Megan Reed. PCEF is a part of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I was hired as the Public Information Manager for BPS. My first day was in early January. So I've been here a whopping, I think I'm on my 10th week now, diving right into the deep end of things right out of the gate, which is fine by me. But the coverage that we've seen over the last week isn't really telling the whole story. And it certainly isn't accurately representing the goals of PCEF, the great work that has already been done, the great work that is coming up, and kind of falsely establishes this narrative of mismanagement or a variety of other kind of false flags that were thrown around in media coverage. We have to strike this really, really delicate balance, which can be frustrating. I certainly acknowledge that. Sam and I have had a lot of phone calls over the last few weeks here, but I want you all to know that we are working on a response. I know that it's frustrating to not see that go out immediately, but the best thing that we can lean on as a program is the honesty of again, just the great work that is being done, all of the measures that are in place for accountability and transparency, and just really leaning on the truth that the people who are doing this work are extremely passionate about and dedicated to honoring the will and the intent of the voters who overwhelmingly passed this program. So we do have some stuff in the works here over the next few weeks, and I think you'll all be happy with what we've got planned. Also want to recognize, kind of going back to the beginnings and the creation of PCEF, BPS city staff in general has been a little understaffed for the last couple of years. My position as the public information manager was vacant for, I think it was a year or two before I even started. I think that there was some PR work that should have happened in a normal circumstance over the last couple of years, and our staff just haven't really had the capacity to do that. And so I am extremely grateful to be here and so excited to help build a more accurate and a more fair and just representation of the program, not only through the media, but through our own proactive outreach to the community at large. So I think that's it for me, at least for right now, but I really would like to hear thoughts of the committee.
Katie, Megan's hand is up. It's hard to see.
Oh, yep. I just touched. Camouflaged.
And Megan here. Megan, thanks. It's really good to meet you. I've had the chance once to meet you, but anyway, I think our PCEF committee is really delighted to know that PCEF now has more staffing on the communications front. And thank you for explaining kind of the gap in the public information or whatever the phrase you described at BPS, because I do think our committee has been constantly concerned about how we, as PCEF, didn't feel like there was enough capacity to have a proactive communication strategy about all the hard work we're doing to set up really deliberative processes and all the huge community engagement we've done and the amazing projects that are kicking off on the ground. So I'm really glad that you're on board. And I know we have Christina kind of doing back-end communications work too. So I'm super excited. I think PCEF's been lacking that. And I'm really excited that we're going to hopefully have a more proactive strategy going forward. And I look forward, I know we have so many meeting topics, but I hope down the line we can have time to talk more in depth about the more proactive fund strategy. Tonight, we probably have to be a little bit more focused on kind of audit response communications, I think, just given the time that it is in the media this last week. So kind of pivoting to that, yeah, I'm really glad also to hear that we are responding. And I mean, we in the collective, you leading it or whoever, because while I think sometimes it might be okay to let media play out and just keep doing our honest work and let the truth stand, and lots of people attend our meetings and really see, like our public testimony earlier, what diligence and effort we're putting in. And so I think on its own that can stand for itself to a degree, but I also think there's a lot of untruthfulness in recent media reporting that I really hope we're able to counter about like basic facts about the program and the work we've been doing. And also that like there are lots of different ways that headlines could have come out around our audit report. And as a co-chair, I signed off on our audit response letter. And I feel like the headline could have been, PCEF program establishes really solid foundation for great long-term work. Brand new program, hard at work, improvements coming, something like that. Like that is what I felt like the audit said. And we agreed as co-chairs and staff with the general recommendations or points made in the audit about ways we can hone and improve the program. But overall, we felt like the message was good foundation laid. Some areas that are actually that need weigh-in by other folks around kind of the climate action plan, for example, is one example. So I feel like we can tell like the more truthful story of what we felt that was. And also, I think a lot of our good work on the metrics ground laying wasn't portrayed in recent media. And I had the privilege to attend a meeting today about metrics with some of our staff here, Katie and Jenna and others who led metrics, and David with talking with community members about green infrastructure reporting. And like the level of discussion was so rich and deep, like we are going to be having amazing metrics. And we're just doing a great community engagement process to robustly develop them. And I feel like that story got lost among others. And I want to be able to tell that story to the public and elected officials and our supporters. I think our supporters know our story, but it's worth telling it again. And also share some of our program successes to date. So I could go on, but I know I want to leave space for other committee members to join. But anyway, I'm glad to hear that you're on board with us, that there's a proactive plan and a response plan. And yeah, so good to hear it.
Thank you, Megan. I just want to add really quick that while media is certainly a portion of communication strategy around a program, and I'm going to do my best not to get super technical and wordy about communications as a profession, but media is really only part of the long-term strategy, right? So there's a lot of really great work that we can do, that I'm working on a plan for, that is really that education outreach piece, because as we move into the future and as we look at the long-term successes of this program, if we really ramp up and do a good job of educating the public, members of the media, kind of everyone about the foundation of the program and what's codified and all of this other stuff, then when you get negative media articles in the future, they're not going to be as impactful because people already know the ins and outs and the structures of the program. So it's a whole complicated web to weave, but I am excited to get the plan in place and move forward.
grantees?
Yeah, thank you, Megan and Megan for the questions. I would just want to say, as a committee member who definitely believes that, who continues to have critical feedback for our program, and understands, like, we're not going to build a perfect product over time. This is an endeavor for the long term, and I've never seen a foundation or a program that's got it right overnight, or even within the span of 2 years. So it's going to be a labor of love, and I do think there are going to be moments where we're going to get critical feedback that we're just going to be humbled and are going to have to be responsive. And I hope that's a story to tell here about the responsiveness of how we take that critical feedback and the next steps. And I think some of the things that we did in response to the audit is setting clear timelines of how we're going to respond to each component and what we're going to do to improve and continue to refine this program. But I'm, as a committee member, I think the story to be told is going to be the story of the grantees. The work, the heart and soul is the actual projects that are being realized, the transformation that's being done, and that real career pathways that it's creating, that I think voters wanted to see to begin with. I think we've all seen business as usual, and seen the climate crisis coming, and we're living it now. And I think that's a story that needed to be told. And I'm not so much interested in just how do we be responsive or on defensive, but just being able to better tell the story of the work of our grantees, because I think that is the heart and the soul of this program. But I appreciate you being on this team and joining us, and look forward to continue uplifting and highlighting the story. So thank you.
All right then. Should we go ahead and move on then and start talking about the audit next steps? Yeah. We're just going to walk over. These are commitments that we talked through and responded to in the audit. So if we're going to move to the next slide, Kay, I'll just list some of these things out. So in terms of our audit next steps, all this work is well underway, and some of this work is new work that we've been in some ways thinking about, but it's important now that we think through how we make that connection stronger. Defining performance metrics by July of this year, and then establishing performance goals by July of next year. First, that body of work is going to be work that's going to happen, and that body of work in terms of the performance metrics is work that's well underway. Megan, you mentioned participating in a community stakeholder meeting where your folks got to talk about green infrastructure and regenerative agriculture metrics. So that work is well underway, and so that we're in tune. But the second piece of that we added is establishing performance goals. So taking those metrics and the metrics we're using to report to the public and turning those into performance goals. We'll be basing a lot of that development, and we'll have a lot of good baseline level of information from some of our inaugural projects, as well as other information we'll pull in from comparable other projects in other parts of in other programs and other jurisdictions and coming to you all. And so that'll be an aggressive timeline, but that's something we've committed to. And it doesn't mean that those goals have to remain the same forever, but it's important we start with those and start tracking to those. The second set of recommendations was that we would develop recommendations to council offering clear strategic direction on our climate goals relevant to PCEF. So this is an area where within the program, within our code, we have defined funding areas, but there was a desire and within the audit that was communicated to have a closer connection to those 2050 goals, that we will be a net zero community by 2050, and drawing the direct PCEF connection, because that 2050 goal may be up here. We have our defined funding areas, and so maybe there's something in between that gives us a little bit more clarity. I think that's work that we're going to begin embarking on, and staff will come back to you all, and we'll talk about this in the next slide around how we see some of that work playing out. And then we've got to begin this conversation, and one of our commenter, David, you spoke to this. We've got to begin this conversation with you all, as well as the commissioner, to outline options for City Council to clarify and amend our program budgeting requirements, as well as our administrative cost limit, both to improve transparency and provide greater budgeting consistency, and to do this by the end of the year. And then a second part of this is we've always seen capacity building as central to the program, that to meet our mission, our objective of benefiting low income and communities of color and making sure that those climate goals reach those communities, that a core part of that is capacity building. But I think at this point, we're realizing that it may help for both ourselves as well as for others to better define our capacity building efforts. And so that's going to be something based on the audit recommendations that we're going to be bringing into these broader conversations. And lastly, this last bullet was in the audit response. And this is going to be work that the committee is going to have to do, and you each in your individual roles, we're going to continue to have these conversations, is to think through the committee's governance structure to make sure there are clear roles and effective oversight responsibilities. And as you've done that evaluation, potentially suggest changes or clarifications by July 2023. As you all know, this structure, the committee structure, was always innovative. It is an intentional, incredibly important part to the way the community designed this program. And so that means that we're going to have to consistently talk about that and think through how to make sure that is effective and working well for you all as well. So those are some of the things, but these all really dovetail with the reality that we have gotten greater and greater budget clarity. And what I mean to say there is that we're now finally, as of about a few months ago, really coming into getting a better sense for what our 2019 revenues are, and that gives us a path forward for what our future revenues are. And so we're expecting to see that our revenues are closer to $80 to $90 million a year. And so that brings about other changes in order so that we can effectively move those resources. And so I'm not going to move to the next slide just yet, but want to just pause here and see if there are any questions, since a subset of committee members engaged in the conversations around this audit follow-up. And I know that for some other committee members, you all were seeing this when the audit was released, as well as and seeing our audit response. So I want to just pause here and see if there are questions about some of the audit next steps and what are some of the implications for the committee. And I'll connect that in the next slide to structural changes too. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide then. So what we mean by structural changes. We have the fortune to have more resources in order to address our urgent climate needs within the community. Some of those, in order to do that effectively, what this provides us is a greater opportunity to do targeted solicitations. There's various things I know you all have thought about, whether this is tree planting in East Portland, whether this is going after multifamily building stock. There's various targeted solicitations that squarely align with the initiative, that squarely align with the city's broader climate goals. And in order to do that, we need to evaluate how do we do that at a scale that works given our capacities and sort of allows us to think through all the ways in which we can support a broader ecosystem of folks doing the work on the workforce side, as well as folks seeking to get these benefits. And so there are structural changes, both to enable some of those sorts of targeted solicitations that we're going to start to come to you all in the next few months and start to share with you all. And then there's a range of housekeeping changes. These are adjustments and edits to the updates to the code from a whole range of lessons learned in our program in our program implementation over the past 2 years. And some of those are just the fact that when the folks drafted the ballot measure, that They weren't necessarily bureaucrats working within it. So some of those are just little tweaks like that. That language doesn't work right there. That doesn't work there. So we'll bring those things to you all. And these are things that we've been sort of had a running list of things that we've needed to do. But these structural changes also enable us to incorporate and account for the audit response, that both the clearer connection to our climate goals, both bringing greater clarity to our capacity building objectives and what capacity building looks like within the program, as well as administrative and program cost clarity. And so it's, in many ways, when we saw the audit, it really dovetailed really well with many of the things we've been thinking about. And in some senses brought clarity some of the other things that we'd been thinking about, but didn't quite have, what might not have had the exact answer. It just brought that fine-tuned clarity. So we're thankful to have received the audit and that it comes at an important time early in our development where as we're iterating and as we're updating, it allows us to take all those changes into account. And so those are some of at a high level, the ways in which we're thinking about structural changes. There's obviously a significant amount of consultations and targeted stakeholder outreach that we're going to be doing as part of that process. But what we anticipate doing is in your next meeting, we anticipate really outlining a broader plan of what that's going to look like in terms of starting from really your co-chairs will be meeting with our commissioner on Monday, starting there, all the way to getting us to recommended changes to City Council in the fall of 2022. So it'll be a work plan that, in terms of the time, makes sense. It means that we're going to need to be diligent about staying on track to those conversations and having conversations outside of committee meetings, one-on-one and small groups as necessary to keep the conversations moving forward. But it's something that I know in many different ways each of you all has probably felt, have echoed, and so we're excited to work with you all in order to figure out that next evolution. Now that we've sort of gone out with our inaugural RFP, our second RFP, and got a better feel for what we're seeing within the applications, and as well as the capacity in the community, we're at a great place to start these conversations. And I know many folks within the community have a range of ideas around what they'd like to see. So that's really what I have here in terms of acknowledging how the audit and our responses aligned really well with many of the things we've been thinking about and much of the work that we've been working on, and just brought greater clarity to it. And we thank the auditor's office for that. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop there and see if there are questions. And obviously we've got other things on the agenda, but I'll pause there and see if there are questions, and encourage you all to ask questions. It's really, this is the time to just ask anything that may be coming up for you around when you see the range of actions we've got, which is ambitious. I don't want to discount the fact that it is ambitious, but it is also, it comes at a great point in our evolution too.
Megan?
I have two questions. One is on climate, the comment on climate goals. I'm curious if you can elaborate a little bit on like how PCEF, like how we would develop climate goals while there may be other city processes going on, and just how that, like how that happens, but also on the admin program cost clarity. So I'm understanding, at least what, that we want clarity from the revenue office and clarity about how we characterize things. But I don't know if I've ever gotten the sense if we have maxed out for staff on admin costs based on past budgets or what the anticipation is going forward. But obviously with the ramping up of the program expenditures, I think we'd probably need to hire more staff. And I think we've talked about in committee meetings before that maybe there's been gaps on the workforce development side or on procurement side or other sides like that. I'm just curious of identifying staff gaps as part of all of that.
Yeah. I'll start with the. Oh, I see Faith's question. Maybe I need to take a running log. Faith, go for it. I'm going to take a log if I respond.
Actually, Sam, please go ahead when you've got Megan's questions in her hand. Mine's more of a comment. So.
Okay. So on the clearer connections to climate goals, we have our 2050 climate goals. We have our 2030 interim climate goals. These are all updated through the Climate Emergency Declaration in 2020. Now, within the program itself, we also have clear funding area allocation. 40 to 60% of our funds for clean energy, energy efficiency, renewable energy, 20 to 25% for workforce contractor development, 10 to 15% green infrastructure, regenerative ag, and 5% for innovation. And so within those areas, there is still a body of work that we know that can, and further defining that can happen both on what does that look like in the single family homes? What does that look like on multifamily homes? What does that look like on on commercial buildings? That's just for the clean energy sector. What does it need to look like for green infrastructure on tree canopy cover? Based on the existing data we have, the existing community climate plans that we have. So there's a range of information out there that dovetail with the sweet spot of the PCEF, the kind of investments that we make, and align as well with the city's broader path to net zero carbon analysis that we've done, which is sort of what does each of these sectors need to, how do they need to move in order to get to net zero? And so part of that is crosswalking that and finding those and outlining where those align well with the PCEF program and where those can and our funding areas. I suspect in these conversations, some of the structural change conversations, one of those others that has been talked about, and I didn't name it here, is also whether there are additional funding areas we should be talking about, and we will come back to you all with those. I mean, transportation being the obvious one that folks have flagged many times over. And so it'll be. I mean, the fortunate thing is we are the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We have our climate team right there, ready and standing, and so it's a great point and a great opportunity to work more closely with them and bring the work that they've done in service to the program and start to share what scenarios can look like in order to draw those connections closer. In terms of the staffing and the program expense related, sort of how we're allocating for that. This has always been a challenging thing, and the audit spoke to that. The reality is we've never had clarity on what our fund balance grows. We don't actually know what's the cadence, the rhythm, and what we've always had as a boundary. It's 44 to 61 million at one point, and then it started, and then really more recently we've known that is no longer the estimate. And so the way that what we've argued is we've looked to our colleagues over at the Children's Levy and others where you have inconsistent revenues, we've taken a cumulative approach. What is our cumulative revenues, as well as what is our cumulative administrative expenses? And so we've taken a long-term view, and what we see now is based on our current staffing levels, and we've got a few more staff. I mean, we've got several staff requests, so we've got budgeted several different additional positions that we will be hiring for. But based on that, we will hit the 5% administrative cap in about 4 years. That's always what we've played with, is that hiring a position is always a challenging thing because it's a question on, are you hiring a 1-year position, a 2-year position, and managing that balance of when do we start to hit our cap just because of cost of living, just because of the increases you expect to see. So when we come to you all and talk about program and administrative costs, you should expect we will be coming to you all and also saying, for the level of work that we're doing, for the type of work that we're doing, for managing this in an effective way, we're going to come to you with we're going to say, this 5% probably doesn't make sense. What is the right number? And we'll come to you with that analysis and suggest a figure that makes more sense. So you should expect that to happen as part of that effort.
Okay.
But maybe, one last, but maybe each time we've gotten a better sense, Megan, that we have more funding, or the balance, where we're like, we have more funding, we've added more staff. And so that's sort of what you're seeing, is each time we're like, oh, no, actually we've got a better sense. So we go back and have added more staff. So we're running at close to our 5% level right now.
That answers your questions, Megan.
Yeah, I think it did. Maybe not the specifics of the types of jobs, but I think that's a more detailed conversation to be had. But, yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Faith, I see you put your hand down. but I just want to.
That's because I was about to speak.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's all good. I just wanted to appreciate, particularly Sam, you saying your enthusiasm, even your openness, and kind of the gratitude for the timing of the audit response, and just the openness to say, yes, we are building a program and this is a great time to get some feedback on where we might focus our energies and efforts. I do think so. I share that enthusiasm and appreciate you bringing that. And I think that we should have recommended changes to council by fall of 2022. So wonderful timing. It is going to be hard. That's a lot of work to do between now and then, particularly given that we have a much bigger round of new grants to get reviewed and out and awarded. So just wanted to be, obviously you're all very mindful of that, but wanted to invite, the committee is going to have plenty of work to do in that review of applications as well, but you should please lean on the committee to make sure that we're driving these structural changes forward, knowing how stretched thin you all are as it is. So just an invitation to engage us further.
Thanks, Faith. Michael?
Yeah, hi everybody. Sorry I was a little late today. I was just wondering, as you know, we know that our funding is currently high because currently there's a bit of a business is doing good, the economy is doing well. In times of recession, though, when sales drop off and our proceeds maybe drop back down to the estimated 40 to 60, is there, will those staffing levels still remain, I hope?
I think, Michael, that's exactly what we're trying to solve for, and bring that clear. And when we say bring clarity, it's really just to publicly state exactly, this is our math, this is how we're doing it, and this is how we're doing it to smooth out that variability. Because you're right, there's some measures that are less variable, and gross receipts tax are variable. I mean, it's more resilient than net income tax, but it still is going to be variable. And so that's what we've attempted to do. So part of this is just codifying what we have started to do. And a big part of this also was when Jason Ford came on as our finance manager. He's taken and built out a system that gives us that clarity well out into the future. And so Michael, I think that's exactly what we're solving for. So we're not in that place where year to year we're trying to figure out where do we need to shave and where do we need to shave on our other admin costs so we don't have to lose a staff position, because that's not a fun place to be.
Francis?
I appreciate the outline, and just thinking continually about how we improve and be responsive to what's in the audit. I'll just, I guess, sort of echo maybe some allusions here that's not clear on the audit, which I would say is just in relation to the admin cost is, I will say there's a history of why institutions have historically capped admin costs. And part of that has always been how you get donors or public institutions or taxpayers to feel like most of the dollars are going into the intended projects or purposes that those intended dollars are meant to be in. What I will say is that I think many organizations and many community groups are beginning to recognize that some of these artificial caps on admin costs have been a great detriment to those organizations and even institutions at the city. Like foundations and programs like this require many hands, requires the type of engagement that we want at the community level, requires deep engagement. Like when we talk about historical institutions, organizations that have not had access to funding, like that's really time intensive. And I think seeing staff do above and beyond with what little resources it has to do that, and seeing smaller organizations or foundations work with a larger set of staff. So I think there's just a reality here that it's not clear in the audit, but I would say is I think we are under capacity at PCEF to do the deep and meaningful work that we need to do, but also to have the kind of experts and forward thinking that we need around contractor and workforce equity. You know, as Michael alluded to, like we've had a probably pretty rosy revenue projection, but we'll probably agree that not everyone in our city or in our state or in our country has recovered from the pandemic equally. And some of the areas that we need to see true equity and justice on the workforce and business side is going to require actual stewards to make sure investments are going deep into that. If we don't have boots on the ground or eyes on the ground to the realities, I feel we're going to fall short. And so if you look at any program in the Portland metro region, when it comes to advancing workforce equity, business equity, we're not doing a good job. And so I think this is an area where I'd say at PCEF is we have a clear climate agenda. So I'm glad to see the need for clarity connection to our climate goals. But I will always continue to sound the alarm that every institution, especially the city, and especially for this program, we're going to need some more help as how do we address and ensure that this is an inclusive recovery. This funding is creating a new reality. So I've said a lot, but I just want to just recognize this team is doing a lot of great work with short capacity, but we need more hands. And so I think it's time that we revisit, these artificial structures on when it comes to admin caps. But I see Robin's hand is up, and I'll stop there.
Robin?
Yeah, hi. I just want to piggyback what Ramses had said. I think, when you're doing community engaged work, the work that we're doing, that is going to be inherently much more expensive than more traditional forms of philanthropy or donations or whatever you want to call it, where a benefactor who claims to know all just kind of disperses their funds. We're trying to listen to the community, engage with the community, learn how to best support the community, and that just takes time and resources. And so I would even go one step further and advocate for increasing the admin cap, beyond 5%. Now, I recognize that right now it's not probably the best time to ask for that, but the reality, as Ramses said, is that this work, to do it right, it really requires more boots on the ground, and it's just much more intensive. So, just wanted to kind of just throw my thoughts in there about the admin cap and say that I think we should do more, and we need to get the money out faster. Just having it sit in a bank account in my mind, just waiting for budget cycles to go through, I think is ridiculous. So if we can get the staff to support that, more staff to support getting out that money faster, I'm up for that. So I'll stop now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just be clear to Robin's your point and Ramses' here is that we will absolutely be coming back to you all when we come back to after we've done our work with a proposal that is a higher admin cap. It'll be about it'll be paired with how does that align with the structural changes we're also talking about in order to move these resources faster. So it'll be two different sets because we have our existing RFPs that we've done, and we expect that we'll continue to do that. But what are the other ways in which we're moving resources? So thank you both for those comments. I might have had some other comment, but I'm drawing blank here. So
yeah. Well, just to do a quick time check, it is 6:57, and so we might actually be at a good kind of point to pause so that we can have our 7 o'clock break with members of the public who are logged on. Does now feel like an okay time to do that? Yeah, okay. So let's take a 5-minute real break. And so then we can come, James will move committee members into breakout rooms at 7:03, and we will, and members of the public should see a little box pop up that gives you an option to go into those breakout rooms when that happens. So we're starting the clock now. We'll see you in the breakout rooms.
I'll just say those breakout groups are never long enough.
Yeah, we had great participation.
Well, it'll be fun when we get to be back in person soon.
That is something that came up briefly in ours. We need to celebrate in person more.
Yes, we haven't forgot about that. It's been quite the bit, but
do we want to? Yeah, do we want to? Does the committee feel like you have more conversation that you want to have around the around the audit and the audit response, or more comments that you want to make, or does it feel like you want to wait until the next meeting when we come with more of a an outline and schedule? We have on the agenda, we had another half hour set aside for additional conversation, but we had also added a half an hour to the end of this meeting. So I just wanted to see if you were feeling like we needed that, or if you were feeling like you might be ready to move on to the mini grants part of the presentation. I saw a hand, I thought for a second. Oh, Michael?
Talking in our breakout group, I guess I think we all had the belief that the audit was really fair and really good and actually really positive. And we're not sure how, I know how, but I was really disheartened that the media took it and made it a really negative thing. I was kind of blown away. I was like, this was a pretty positive audit. It said, here's some things that you can improve on. Your new organization, we expect these things to happen. You're working on these things. Some things require some outside help, like climate policy, but we're doing great. And I don't know what happened in between that and the reporting the next day, but I think I was just a little taken aback by the whole thing.
Thanks, Michael. Robin?
Yeah, I just want to comment on what Michael said. And I think, as part of being more aggressive or proactive, whatever you want to do with the media plan and media engagement going forward, I think, we need to be more anticipatory and anticipate, things like this, that, when we do the next round of grants, right, and announce it, there will be grants that people find questionable. And, we should be prepared to respond to that. And the critics, right? And I don't like to say this word, but, spin it, right, accordingly. Or when the next version of the audit will come out, whenever it happens, I don't know if it's anytime soon, but, again, there'll be suggestions for improvement, and, just anticipating that, there will be critics that will kind of harp on the negative points and be able to respond to it, right away. I think right now, I think just because of how we're set up and we're in a reactionary mode, it's sometimes hard for us to respond quickly and consistently and act proactively. So just kind of food for thought, as those, communications plans, get developed.
Megan?
Yeah, just a brief comment that I think a lot of our reaction tonight too is against some of the media, but I thought some of the reporting on our audit was actually fairer than others. Like the OPB piece was relatively fair, I think, in its assessment. Again, I would have worded the headline differently for all of them, really, but they did vary in their stories. So I think certain articles took their own have different spins on it. But anyway, just pointing out that there was a diversity of media with different approaches. And then back to the proactive one, I am looking forward to us all being together and visiting some of our projects that are often launched and were funded in the first round. So that's something I hope we all get to do really soon. And I really hope we get the second round of funding out, good quality projects out soon, so that we have that to kind of report in the media.
You know, folks, I connected with Megan in the break, and I said, Megan, I think we're done with this conversation. Go off, dude. So I sent Megan, I let Megan go off. So I don't have, and I think I have a whole range of thoughts and comments, Michael and Sean, for what you shared, and Megan and Robin. But yes, I think, you know, the beautiful thing is our first projects, and we're getting those invitations. We're getting invitations to our first solar projects getting built. We're getting our invitations to a range of our first, you know, ribbon cutting, so to speak. So we're getting those opportunities to get out there and start to cultivate those stories. And Christine, who's listening, we're actively working on our contract, so we can have more resources on board to help cultivate and develop those stories on those projects that are happening, so we can tell those stories. So this is, you know, the level of critique here with PCEF has always been high. I think there's a lot that can be said about that and where the root of where that comes from. And I have a whole range of thoughts about that, but it has always been high. And so I think it's fair to your point, Robin, that we should expect that. And as we have our projects that speak to all the good stuff that are happening, that'll be exactly where we'll be spending our efforts here. And so I think maybe unless there's another comment, I think where Katie may be ushering us to next is going to be one of those positive areas where I hope we can end for all the frustrations that I think you all have felt, that I certainly have felt this week. There's some good stuff here. So
yeah,
good stuff here.
So we're bringing Angela back in for the feel good story to close us out tonight. Angela, take it away. Let me know when you want me to advance your slides.
All right. I'm really glad that I get to bring the fuzzy feelings. Okay, mini grants. So you can start on the first slide there. So today I'm going to be giving a program evaluation. So I'll get into what that looks like, but first let's look at the timeline. Some of these slides are going to look pretty familiar. I was here with y'all in November giving you an update. So if we're tracking along from program design, we launched it, we've run 3 cycles, and now we're down at that apple of review performance and improve program. So today is just a presentation where there's a bunch of charts and graphs, and we'll kind of go over everything so that you can chew on it, ask lots of questions, and then at a future meeting, it'll actually be a decision around the allocation and recommendation for the next year of mini grant funding. Next slide. Okay, so as a quick refresher, program purpose is mini grants were created to respond to small, time-sensitive funding needs, create an on-ramp to PCEF, grow the universe of nonprofits doing environmental justice work, and provide a low barrier funding opportunity that prioritizes small and PCEF priority community reflective organizations. So we are in the year 1 phase right now, where the look back that we're doing is just a program evaluation. Year 2 is where we'll actually get into some of the grantee evaluation. We'll have some reference under our belts to be able to set goals and continue to look ahead from there. Okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this slide because I've put it in front of you all a few times before. The main pieces to know are for fiscal year 21-22, it was $400,000 split into 4 quarterly cycles, $100,000 quarterly disbursement, $5,000 individual grant funding level, that's limited by city code. And then there's some other pieces there of sort of how it functions. We've covered that in previous ones, but you have that there in front of you if you need to refer back to or ask questions about sort of the process of how it works. Okay, so for this evaluation process, this is a program evaluation just looking at the first 3 cycles. So we did one with a deadline date of August 2021, October 2021, and January 2022. We have our 4th quarterly cycle deadline is April 1st. This is me putting in a plug for that April 1st deadline. Looking forward to seeing the applications that come through there. So this evaluation focuses on the program design, the reach that we've had thus far, and some of the initial results. The scope of this is really limited to the information that we're able to gather during the application and selection phases of the program. The grant terms are a year. So, with the August 1st cycle, those aren't going to come to term until August of 2022. So we're not quite there yet to speak on those parts. And so at the end of the 1-year grant term, from there going forward, we're going to be able to have a little bit more from the grantees' perspective specifically. So there'll be a survey capturing some of their experience. We'll be able to see how their actual performance went, and then continue to update the program evaluation pieces as well. Okay, so let's jump in. So for current results, this is the who. Who are we funding? This data represents, I pulled together the data for all 3 cycles so you could get an idea. The priority group definitions, I've reviewed this in the past, but I have them there for reference. You'll remember that the committee also made the decision to, in the past, prioritize not only small organizations that we've defined as 3 full-time positions or less, but also ones that are majority reflective of PCEF priority communities. So you'll see that it's sort of the groups function that way. From group 1 down to group 4, it's the sort of different combinations of the prioritization. And so you can see there in terms of, is the process working? Are we selecting the folks that we want to prioritize? Overwhelmingly, yes. Group 1, 80% of our grantees have come from that group. In a future slide, we can look at that breakdown in more detail. Group 2, 12%, and it kind of goes down from there. So we want this to be, we intentionally created it to be open to all, but we wanted to create that prioritization, and we're seeing it in the results where the vast majority of the folks that we're selecting are small organizations, and they are majority reflective of PCEF priority communities. So it's really great to see that. Also, feel free to stop me along the way if you have a question, though we do have a discussion slide at the end. Okay, continuing on the who are we funding. So this slide shows the sort of the demographics of the organizations in terms of who do they serve and who do they reflect. You'll remember from the November presentation that version 1 of the mini grant application included some demographic questions that, while helpful, didn't have the granularity that we were looking for, specifically in this demographic section, to be able to have a lot of clarity about how to prioritize folks as they were applying. So we made some tweaks, feeling really good about the results of those changes. So I think that gets us on track, and we're continuing forward with those, the questions as they now look. But for the purposes of this presentation, I sort of pulled it all together to show you here what it's looking like. I'll say that the trend line was the same from the original questions to the new questions, but it gives us more confidence and clarity with the new questions. So what we see here, we have a range of representation, people with disabilities, that is our lowest reach. This is really helpful when thinking about how we're going to do our targeted outreach, the kinds of folks that we need to spend more time on bringing into the fold. And know that these aren't mutually exclusive. So there are groups that are really focusing on multiple PCEF priority communities and reflecting multiple PCEF priority communities. But yeah, so that is how it's looking. And I feel like I should have made a note on the gender piece. There's a much longer definition. This is just sort of collapsing it down, the way that we talk about organizations that focus on women, non-binary, two-spirit. There's like a much longer definition that we use that I just broke down into there. Ramfis?
Thank you for this breakdown. Have we had any groups like student organizations or parent-teacher organizations that have applied?
Yeah. We've had, I guess we've had a range. There have been some like educational groups that have applied. There have been some like youth activist groups that have applied. We've seen some schools. I guess this is a good time for me to reference in the email that you received about this meeting. There's a full, it's like a 7-page description of every organization that was selected and a quick description of what the grant funds, the projects that we were funding. So yes.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. I think part of my follow-up question is more about like just how we continue to raise awareness for student groups and parent-teacher groups on this program, because I think that's just when I think of my own involvement or other involvements, and just having talked to the recent high school students, like they're talking about these issues, and
yeah.
This seems like a great entryway for a program, especially for folks I think want to be more active and have a voice, and this is a clear program to do that.
Couldn't agree more. Okay. No other questions. We can continue along. Okay, so here we're looking at staff size. So, the last one we looked at when we think about those priority groups was the PCEF priority communities, and then it was also the size of the organization. So we can see there that if you look at the pie chart, the majority of it is either 0. I specifically called out 0 because I was like, oh, inside we say 3 or less. If you do 3 or less, it's the majority of the pie, but it's interesting to see that almost half of that is volunteer-led organizations that are benefiting from this. So these are folks that have no full-time staff. Some of them have a little bit of part-time staff. Some of them do some contracted work, but the majority of them are volunteer-led groups, which is really exciting to see. You see there the largest organization that we funded so far had 39, but overall, the sizes are staying very small. So again, it's showing that the process that we put in place is getting the results that we intended of really prioritizing small groups. We're seeing that reflected in the folks that are getting selected. Fiscal sponsorship. So that's another one of those places where we can use that as an indication of the kinds of organizations that we're seeing come to us for, in the mini grant program, and sort of where they're at in their organizational development. So 41% being fiscally sponsored. It's exciting to see that too. I'm also seeing a trend of groups that start fiscally sponsored and then over a period of time, over the year are moving through to get onto their own 2 feet as an organization and get registered. And so it's really great to see and be able to support organizations when they're right at this juncture. Okay. So this is the more detailed breakdown of each of the cycles. I'll make a note that when you're looking at the numbers where there's a request and then there's a total funded, let's say we're looking at group 1, for instance, in January 2022, the only reason that folks in group 1 may not have been selected for funding is if they did not pass eligibility review. So that's where you see in the January cycle, we had 88,000 in requests, but only 68,000 were approved. That's because there was a handful of folks where they didn't pass the eligibility screening. Yeah, so a couple of the trends that we're seeing from cycle to cycle, I talk about this at the end, but I'll point it out here where it's really demonstrated, is that, you know, we launched the program, we had a huge response, 85 applications, which was a lot. And we selected, you know, we've been selecting 20 from there. That number has gone down. So you see it goes from 85 to 41 to 25 in the last cycle. So I talk about that a little bit in a future slide, but I just wanted to show how that's shaking out. I think that there's, you know, the newness of a program and then it starts to settle somewhere. So that'll be part of thinking about the recommendation for allocation for next year. I'm not going to dig into all of the numbers here, but are there any questions that folks have when looking at this sort of detailed slide? Michael?
Yeah, do you have any numbers for how many people from the August cycle reapplied for the October cycle, reapplied for the January cycle?
Okay, that is a very good question. I can tell you anecdotally, that would have been a good number for me to have on hand. Just a few for right now. There have been, in terms of folks that have, I guess a couple of thoughts. There have been, I would say, less than 5 that have applied more than once. And a few of those have been selected for a second time. The funding request has to be for an entirely separate request and like an entirely separate project. It can't add on, and that has to do with city code. But we also have in the prioritization sort of process, if someone has already been funded in a year and within the fiscal year, they're at a lower priority level, even if they're part of group 1. We try to get the new folks in first before we're giving a second, you know, mini grant to anyone. But we have had, I think only like 2 or 3 that have received a second grant.
I guess my question was more, are we encouraging folks that don't get grants to reapply for the next funding cycle?
Yes,
is what I'm saying.
completely.
So if you didn't get the grant in August, how many folks are reapplying in October? And if they didn't get it in October, or that was their first one, they didn't get it, did they reapply in January?
Yeah, okay. So part of one of the things that we've done in the structure of the program is that if you apply, you're found eligible and you're not selected, you're given the option to have your application be considered in the next round without having to reapply. So that offer is always out there when I'm sending out the sort of the selection communications. I'll say that the trend that we've seen is kind of follows the trend in terms of the number of applications. From the August cycle, we had 13 applications that were not selected and wanted to be considered in the next round. Several of those were then selected in the October round. As the number has gone down, fewer folks have had the opportunity to take up that option. So we've seen it work. I think it's dependent on the number of applications that come through the door. Because for instance, if you look at the January cycle, we got 25 applications in and we selected 21, and the 4 that we didn't select were not eligible. So no one even had the chance to ask for that yet. But I very much encourage folks to take advantage of that opportunity. Megan.
Yeah, just super quick clarification. What are the kinds of things that are making them ineligible? Like, you know, just trying to understand that.
Yeah, so the main place that we see that is a connection to climate. So the main eligibility pieces are the alignment with the PCEF goals of addressing climate change and advancing racial and social equity. So oftentimes I've through eligibility screening, we've seen folks that are doing a lot of really great racial and social equity work. And then the connection to climate in their proposal just isn't there. And so for those folks, I always make an offer. Several folks have taken me up on a follow-up conversation to sort of talk through what was missing and why they didn't pass eligibility. And we have had a couple of folks that didn't pass it in one and later came back and did. So I think that's one of those pieces to kind of increase the knowledge and understanding of climate work, but also of the program. Okay. All right, next. Okay, so what are we funding? So the way that I'm able to sort of describe this portion is in the way that we structured the application to streamline the application and the grant agreement. We ask questions according to the budget line items. This is a way for them to for applicants not to have to submit a separate budget as like a separate attachment. We just ask them, are you going to be buying things? Yes or no? If so, how much? What are you going to buy? So then we're able to use that to build out their grant agreement and their budget. So that's what we're looking at here. It's sort of what folks have asked for and have been funded for. So on the left, we have the total amount requested. And then on the right, we have the average dollar amount requested. Keep in mind, the cap is $5,000. So that's why you're seeing the numbers are all, fairly low. But what we're seeing here, contracted services and buying items are definitely coming out at the top. There's especially, I think that it is really reflective of the organizations. Remember, the staff size of those organizations is very small. Many of them, when they're getting the funding, they're turning around and they're, hiring someone to come in and help the organization. A note that I want to make while we're looking at this slide is just to acknowledge that the scope of mini grants is intentionally limited. We've been talking about capacity building. Michael in the breakout did an incredible job of describing capacity building to a member of the public. That was just great and encapsulated all the complexity that there is. Mini grants isn't solving for that. That's a separate, much larger conversation. So I just wanted to say that we hear those needs as I'm running mini grants. I'm hearing a lot of the capacity concerns, but mini grants isn't necessarily trying to solve for all that. It's solving for something much smaller, which is those pieces that we talked about in the beginning in terms of an entry point, some time-sensitive funding needs, projects, events, that kind of a thing. Okay, I'll pause there and see if there's any questions coming up in terms of what we're funding. Okay. All right, we can always hop back to a slide if anyone wants to. Okay. All right, so I did this with the last time that I came, and I really liked it. Hopefully you all did too. I would love to have committee members each read off one of these bullet points. So these are quotes directly from applications that describe what they were applying for. And I'll let you guys just popcorn.
I'll start. Support the Portland Youth Climate Collective and organize the second annual Portland Youth Climate Summit. I'll pass it to Megan, just to try to get some order.
Put together a mobile solar-powered setup for outdoor music and video educational events for BIPOC youth and young adults in Portland, Oregon. How about Michael?
The project will produce 2 video interviews of BIPOC individuals working in the green economy. How about Shanice?
Denise is not here tonight.
Man,
So
how about Robin? Or no, I mean Ramphis.
I also appreciate Robin's reading of things, so you might go back to Robin here. We are, sorry, I forgot where we left off here. We are currently building an anti-depression medicinal and food permagarden and gathering space for Argyle Gardens, a sustainable low-income apartment community in North Portland. We'll pass it to Faith.
Assess our community understanding of environmental justice and their needs. This combines with our 3-year strategic plan to develop youth leadership by attracting next generation leaders. Awesome. Let's see, I'm not looking at you all, I'm looking at a speaker view. So who is left?
Maria.
Maria, yay.
Staff to attend trainings on climate change, resilience, action, engage the Indigenous community to hear climate change impacts and their ideas for climate adaptation and actions, gather an advisory of Indigenous community members who have experience in Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge and Western bioecology related to climate adaptation.
All right, this is like, we're at max fuzzy feelings, but we're going to go to the next slide and I'm just going to take it over the top. Okay, so incredible timing, but 2 days ago, I got my first report back from a grantee, because remember those 1-year grant terms? I'm sort of not expecting them for a while, except that RIAP, the Rohingya Youth Association of Portland, sent in their application. And so I wanted to, or sent in their final report. So I wanted to share this with you all and give you a little bit of a highlight of how their project went. So they applied as part of the August 2021 cycle. I'm really excited to select them. You know, after they were selected, they're like very excited to provide workshops to community members around different things of energy efficiency. And I had a meeting with them when I was setting up their grant agreement, and I was talking to them about it. And I used the word weatherization, and they weren't familiar with the word. We talked about what weatherization was. And then they came to me and said, do you have any ideas of who would be good to provide some of these workshops? I suggested that they connect with the Community Energy Project. So then time goes by and I hear back, and then we get their final report. I'm going to read out, this is an excerpt from their final report, and then this is a picture from one of the workshops that they did. So we learned a lot about saving energy. As we did the presentation, it really struck us how saving money and saving the environment were 2 sides of the same coin and not opposites. Another big lesson was to learn about CEP and all the neat programs they offer. There are ways our community can partner with them further moving forward. A third thing we learned from this project was that for members of the community that don't own homes, but instead rent their apartments, there is still a lot for them to learn from our presentations. I am just so excited to hear sort of where they started, how something as small as a mini grant has increased their knowledge, and they are now part of the application cycle for RFP2 for a larger grant. So kind of an incredible demonstration of some of the things that we've been hoping to do. They're exactly, representative. They're a volunteer-led group. They reflect PCEF priority communities. They are getting on-ramped onto our program. They're increasing their knowledge around, climate, community-led climate work. So I wanted to share that story with y'all because it really made my heart burst. Okay, next slide. Okay, so observations and conclusions. We're seeing a mix in the type of requests I strongly encourage folks, if you haven't already, read through the little memo that has a description of all the different things. There is such a wide variety of stuff that folks are getting funded for, which is really exciting. We're seeing a lot of small projects and activities and a lot of grant writing support. In the future, I'll be able to come back and let you know folks that have been funded for grant writing or folks that have been funded in general through mini grants and how they are showing up in our other RFP cycles. Demand. So you heard me talk about this in the previous slide that had the detailed cycle, like the numbers for each cycle. We've seen a decline in the total number of applications. Some different thoughts on what the decline could be related to. It could both be related to our level of outreach. We did a huge push when we were launching the program. Since then, we've had less intentional push happening. We have had some, but there's definitely a need for more, and to do that really strategically. And then also the possibility that there's a leveling off happening in community groups. You know, when something is new, there's a lot of interest, but sometimes as folks are getting to know it, they know whether they want to go for that or not, if it's appropriate or not. So imagine it's a combination of a few different elements, and that we're going to find the number is going to probably bounce around, but hover probably somewhere around where we are now, which that last cycle was 25 applications for the quarter. Staff capacity. So staff capacity limits our ability to provide one-on-one assistance to mini grant recipients. We've talked about staff capacity this meeting already. You know, as we're getting so many mini grants through, as things are coming up, it's sort of, you know, to maintain a high level of service, there's a reality of like what level of service we're able to provide for folks, depending on the number of applications and staff working on it. So where we stand, some conclusions are there's a need for focused and strategic outreach and communications to promote the program to priority communities and to do so throughout the year. You know, that quarterly cycle comes up quick. And so making sure that we're maintaining sort of a diversity of communications and outreach tactics throughout the year to really focus on those different groups. And then the total allocation amount needs to be reduced to both match the demand that we're seeing, that demand kind of level off and come down, and also match the staff capacity to meet that demand. So there's one more slide. Okay, so again, no decision tonight, but wanted to put out what our recommendations were so that you could think about it, discuss if there's some amendments you want to make. The actual decision will be made at a later date. So program recommendations are that staff will create outreach and communications plan to maintain and increase applications from PCEF priority communities. And then the recommendation is to allocate $200,000 to mini grant program for fiscal year 22-23. So this past year, it was $400,000 and we're recommending $200,000. So for discussion, really anything you guys want to discuss, but to guiding questions, does the committee have any questions about the recommendations and any additions or amendments to make? Okay, I see Michael and then Megan and then Robin. Michael.
So for allocating 200,000 and cutting them in half, is that due to your prediction of less grant applications or because of staff resourcing limitations?
Combination of both of those things. Yeah, I think the leveling off, we want to, you know, ideally ensure that the mini grant program stays competitive, right? Like we want there to be where we really are selecting for that priority one group and having the majority of the folks that we select be from the groups that we're trying to prioritize. That's our ideal. So as that number is going down, we want to make sure that we're sort of like matching that, and the staff capacity is a real limiting factor for where we're at right now. What I'll say about that feels exciting to me is that we've built the system. We're seeing that it's working, which is really exciting. We're able to sort of tweak it now. So for where right now, and we make this decision for this coming year, and then we see that there's a much higher interest in the coming year, and that the capacity also goes up. We just have to tweak that. The systems that we have in place in the application process, it can take more funding, it can take less funding. It's really sort of what the demand and the capacity looks like. So we can play with that over the year. Nothing has to be fixed. Okay, Megan.
Yeah, I have two questions, and one is along the same lines as Michael's there. Like from those charts you showed, I guess I didn't see as sharp of a drop off as you're describing now to like cut the program. It just seemed like maybe we were hitting a sweet spot, that actually 100,000 4 times a year might be the sweet spot. So I guess I'm not understanding your conclusion based on the data you showed us, but maybe I'm misunderstanding. And in general, it's such a small program that I'm like my first reaction isn't like, oh, let's cut it. Now staff, that I'm like, can we continue it for another year with a little beefed up outreach, because of all the potential for it. So that's kind of my first reaction. I understand staff capacity, and I don't know the ins and outs of all, like if there's any way of like reducing the management. I don't, maybe not, but like, I get that that's another angle. But I guess on the pure demand side, I don't know if I saw that in the numbers as much as it sounds. It sounded like we gave out 100,000 about each time of the 3 times. And there was, declining demand, but what if it levels off now? So it's just a thought. And then of course, I missed my chance earlier, but I always ask for disaggregated data, and it's more disaggregated. But I'm curious about the BIPOC organizations, about if we have Black and Indigenous led, like how those numbers, if you have any sense on that, within those groups, just because within our guiding principles, we center those groups first.
Yeah. That is a good question. So I'll start with the last piece and then I'll go back. So right now, with the way that we collect the information, it's not disaggregated to that level. It's by community group, and the community group is, for BIPOC, it is sort of all together. The balance that we're trying to strike there is the simplicity of the application and the level of information that we can get, where right now, I would argue that it's at a pretty good place where it's still simple and pretty light lift for folks, but still gives us a fairly good illustrative idea of who's applying. We get that level of detail on the back end. So part of the final report is a much more detailed and fully disaggregated demographic report that they do for all of their board and staff. So we'll be able to report on that on the back end of who was selected, but it gets a little, we're trying to do that balance. So, but I'm open to, continuing to refine it to be able to have that. But I think that as time goes on, and we'll be able to provide that detail.
Collecting in the back end could work. I just think about like, if we know who we're missing, we know who to target better. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So it could really inform the whole plan to do enhanced outreach.
Yeah. So to the first point you made around where we set it, for where we're at right now, the demand is going down. You're right. We're not sure exactly where it's going to level off. But the staff capacity is, right now, I think it's too much for the capacity that we have. And I think that there's a little bit of a reality of where we stand right now with the capacity to put specifically onto this program. There are so many competing priorities for where we need to put capacity. like as a whole program, that we need to kind of weigh all of those pieces together. So that is informing this recommendation right now. Kind of, as I said a second ago, as things evolve and change, we get to, change those numbers again if that feels right.
And let me chime in here just a moment. I think this is one of those areas that, as Angela said, we're going to need to keep an eye on and track. But it's a tremendous amount of work when we have 20 grantees that we are processing through, and it's a tremendous amount of Angela's time. And Angela is incredibly talented, and so there's these conversations on highest and best use of individuals and stuff. We've been tracking sort of the application volume that's been coming in, and the priority groups and how many of them are rising to the top and filling all those slots, and where that balance is shaking out. It's a question we've thought through, and to be able to take some of that off Angela's plate, because it's a significant amount of Angela's time focused on this, and I don't want to. I think there's a lot of future conversations on other iterations of what this could look like within the program, and it was important that it was important to have that investment here now at this point. But as we were starting to play with what's the right level, it's been something we've been thinking about, how to bring Angela in other parts of the program where she'll bring a tremendous amount of value as well. So I mean, Angela, it's a majority of your time that you're spending on this.
Yeah, I was trying to like gloss over it a little bit, but the administration of grants essentially looks the same at the city if you're talking about $1,000, if you're talking about $1 million in terms of the steps that you have to go through. And there are many. The administrative, there's a lot. So, but it's really exciting to like see, who we're selecting and the kinds of projects. And I like deeply believe in funding at this level, and that on-ramp and the things that we're doing there. But there's, a reality of what 80 grants at this level looks like. And it's a lot. Yeah. Robin?
So I have two comments. One, or questions. Would you say that this is more motivated by capacity, your capacity, versus demand? I mean, demand is a factor, but it's sounding like capacity is a more overriding factor.
I mean, the capacity piece is really real, but what's also real, and I think it wasn't demonstrated as well in my slides, is that the demographic, like right now, we're still, the number that you saw for the group 1, that highest priority group, is still really high. However, as time has gone on, we are seeing some of those, groups 3 and 4 get selected, because as the total applicants are going down, so is the number from that highest priority group. And so that's where we're looking at, like, we want to make sure that this program is, the majority of it is really going to benefit the folks that we're trying to prioritize. And if that demand is going down, and I mean, there's lots of factors here, right? Because then there's the outreach piece, but sort of how it all comes together, we want to make sure that where the funding line is does still capture that the majority of the funding is going to the highest priority group. Does that make sense?
No, I get it. And I'm looking at it. I'm offline on my own screen, and I'm looking at that group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4 chart, and it spells it out. And I see the trend that you're talking about. I guess, just a couple comments. I think Megan said this is, dropping it from 400,000 to 200,000 just seems big. But, I don't know the capacity issues, and I'm a little bit disappointed to hear that, processing a $1,000 grant takes the same amount of work as a $100,000 grant. If there's some creative ways, to get around that, then, those should be pursued. I know the city is a city, and I guess it's just unfortunate, but yeah,
Robin,
I'll just.
I think the part of what we're wrestling with here is and maybe Katie, I don't want to. We've got the system we've developed now, and I mean, as you all know, Angela is a rock star. So and it's great. And so we're teasing out this balance and testing out, okay, is there a different balance that feels right given the demand and the capacity? And then there's the alternative, I think, that creative way, which is potentially outsourcing this work. And I think we haven't gone there, we haven't explored what that looks like yet, but that could be at some point on the table of, we've done this, is there a way that, do we move this to another organization outside the city where we grant them the resources to then grant out those groups, because they don't necessarily have the same, they may not necessarily have the same hoops that they need to jump through. So I think there are other ways, and I think that is part of the conversation, but it's important that we've remained close to this first cohort, in part to figure this out, in part because it's an on-ramp to the broader program and to make that connection. But there are other ways to move these sorts of resources from the city into the community.
Thank you.
Katie, did you want to add a comment to that before I hand it over to Rafis?
I guess I just wanted to say, I mean, I think, Sam, I appreciate that you brought that up. We have been having those conversations, and it does kind of also have a little bit of an intersection with this, being more explicit about our capacity building efforts, the conversation that Sam was talking about earlier, that would potentially require a code change, be one of the things that we might recommend as a code change. So I think there's some intersection and relationship there. And I guess also just to be sort of honest and say, yeah, it's a capacity, it is definitely a staff capacity issue. I mean, if we had lots of outreach and engagement, we could probably get 80 Group 1 folks every year, but we have, we have $60 to $100 million worth, to get out the door. So having staff focused on 200 or 400, thousand, we recognize the importance of that, of the program and of the activity, but we just, right now, we're operating with a finite pie. And so we need to make sure that our staff resources are allocated in a way that we can get the money on the street.
Thanks, Katie. Rafis?
Thanks. They do say that time is, I think, more valuable than money, and that's the shortest resource. I appreciate all the work here. I think PCEF is at a critical juncture where I think we had to figure out how do we really spend the time that we have now that we are a growing program and now grant making near 60 to 80 million. So it does feel like we are at a juncture of making some hard decisions here, but I think this program seems to the good work on this program seems to reflect itself. I appreciate all the work that you've done, and I just want to recognize that probably it does take a lot of time, as you're saying, to do that outreach, to process these grants, and to even just aggregate the data and present that to us here. I mean, that there's a lot of work that's being done here. So I just want to echo, the feelings that other committee members are saying here, because, it's a program, it's there and it's a resource. And I even hear with you here that it's, you still fundamentally believe that there should be some kind of level. I'm glad there's some, creative, it sounds like there's some creative thinking about how to maybe continue forward. If I could provide maybe an idea, I don't know if necessarily addresses fully the capacity that, issues that we have, but I do see maybe there's an area to experiment how we continually make this application more accessible. I think we still work and operate in the funding world on paper applications, and that's still a barrier, whether writing is not your strong suit or if English is your second language. So, if there's an opportunity to experiment with, a video application, a social media application, like people, that's a real inclusive tool. I'm surprised by how savvy people more every day, more savvy than I am with using social media or videos. And I think there's something to be said about, just the democratization about the accessibility of that tool and getting more accessibility for folks to present their story, present their narrative, if you will, for their project. And maybe it's another opportunity to highlight and further promote all the potential programs that exist here. So maybe getting two birds with one stone here of even getting some stories out there. Does that make processing easier on the other side? I don't know. So I'll let you all be the tough judges, but I thought I'd at least offer that. It's just outside the box thinking about how we just, cut the barriers and just having everything be on a piece of paper.
Thanks, Ramfis. I really appreciate that. And I like the vision. I was like getting images as you were talking about that. We've been able to do, I'll say from accessibility, we've been able to do some. The application is currently fully translated on the digital platform in 8 languages, including English. So, and we have been able to do some accessibility accommodations for folks, such as them providing their application over the phone and us as staff doing the writing and the processing on our part. So we've been able to do some, but I like your vision for like all the different ways. Yeah, there is the piece of like currently with how it's run through the city, nothing changes afterwards. It's very rigid. But as Sam said, there is creative thinking in terms of like, how do we maintain the goals? And everyone's been talking about it. How do we get the money moving faster? So there's some realities and some different avenues to get to where we want to go. Megan?
Yeah, sorry that I'm chiming in late again, but when it's getting late in the meeting here, but yeah, Ramfis mentioned once to me like TikTok video submissions, and
oh my god,
that sounds exciting. Just saying,
that's a dream.
It sounds exciting. I haven't yet tried TikTok, but lots of people tell me I should, so maybe one day. But anyway, I think you can hear that a lot of us are resisting like the idea of cutting. But it also, to me, this conversation is just surfacing the staff capacity issue really hugely in ways that I don't think we've really talked a lot about at committee. We've like talked about it in the abstract, but not necessarily besides communications and the like how it's actually as a full committee like impacting a program really possibly really negatively. And so I'm just like flagging that as like that's a possibly solvable or not in the short term, but like, and I don't know with that discussion of administrative costs and if you're talking about hiring out and out, like exactly how that would work, but I don't necessarily want like that to be the reason we're not doing something that's really useful to the community. So I just am flagging it as like I hope that we don't get stuck on like that doesn't make us force programmatic decisions. Those aren't the reasons. And I hope we can figure out a way, maybe not this round, but like in the next 2 years as we're responding to the audit and doing some strategic planning for the program.
Yeah, I think we've got what we've developed here, along with the other grant making program. And so there's a piece of you move one lever at a time, and so dialing this back as we learn and see what happens elsewhere, as well as I think there are, when we're going through the conversation, and Katie touched on it, this is one format, one way, does not answer capacity building. And as we ultimately come to this other place of what does other capacity building look like within the program as we carve it out, as we talk about it and define that more clearly, we're going to come back and I would expect us to further define this because there's a lot of learnings here. So I think that it's fluid and that there are many elements of this, and this is just one place where in the short term, there's a recommendation we have in order to make adjustments to create room so that we can leverage Angela and other parts of the program, and at the same end have this do well. We think it meets that balance of still serving that priority one groups really well, generally well, and keeping that competitive while preserving our ability to ramp that up or change that in the future.
Yeah, and maybe if I could just, I guess, make one small point about kind of like the things going through the process in the city. And Angela noted that, you know, it's because the sort of constraint on capacity makes it so we can't really provide good one-on-one support, like the level of one-on-one support that we would want to for mini grant recipients. There are a lot of steps to sort of like get a grant agreement in place and get the proper insurance paperwork and having it look right and things like that. And for larger organizations like that kind of have that all dialed in and have experience working with the city, that process might be pretty quick and not take very much of a project manager's time. But for very small organizations who might need help finding an insurance provider to get insurance so that they can have the grant award, that's a lot more sort of phone calls and emails that Angela is having back and forth with people who are awarded funds. So the process, the amount of time that it takes to sort of get through that administrative process is related to the newness of the organizations and to the size of the organizations. And so that's unlikely to, or we don't want that to change. We want newer, you know, emerging and smaller organizations in this program. So I just wanted to, I guess, note that's a big piece of it, of the amount of time it takes up front. Any other thoughts? We are at 8:20. I feel a little bit like we took you on a roller coaster. We were like down and then we kind of came up and then we just kind of came back down, and now it's 8:30 almost. No, but so I'm not sure we have anything else to sort of bring. We're on the boardwalk.
I'd just like to say that I'm really amazed by the mini grants. I think that's why we're all a little bit like, oh, 200,000, because like this is, you know, I wish it was easy to get it, to work it through with the city, because man, like $5,000 mini grants that are easy to apply for get used quick and efficiently and by awesome organizations. So I mean, I think that like our kind of like roller coaster down is just because we're like so excited about what happened, right? So, and how the first 400,000 was used.
Ramsey?
Yeah, so I think Art already said it, but you know, the 5,000 folks applying for grant writers, yeah, I think it does exemplify the need for capacity building grant. Like, you know, I think every small organization's like probably doing the cost benefit analysis is like taking the time to apply for this grant, and $5,000, like, do you even out or on the positive? And I think if we were to listen just on the feedback on that, I think it raises the need for capacity building grants that are much larger in size and really helping organizations grow. And so I think in one sense, it's awesome to see folks apply for that. But in the other sense, I also recognize, like there's just a need there that we're not filling in. And yeah, again, I'm looking forward to what staff has cooked up on its thinking here on capacity building. But just wanted to just echo what I've been hearing here today. And yeah, just echoing it up. Michael's like, this is tough, but looking forward to what's the next round of refinement here.
Ramses, I'll say that a piece that excites me is that we have, I feel like through this experience, I have like so much that's happening to really deeply understand those capacity pieces that are coming through, you know, like the issues and concerns that are coming out and how they're playing out for organizations, that the value of this first round of mini grants is greater than just the dollars in the grants that we've put out, because it's also giving us an incredible amount of like data and experience to help us shape the future iterations. This is where we're starting, and we're able to really precisely pinpoint through the experiences that we're having, to then take all of that and continue to develop it into like richer and evolve it forward. So I adore the mini grant program and the work that's getting funded, and I look ahead and get even more excited for what's to come and the future evolution of that it can take.
Well, thank you, Angela. And Angela will be back probably potentially at the next committee meeting, or if not, then the one after that, to sort of discuss this again. If committee members kind of have thoughts in between now and then, I know that you didn't get these slides ahead of time, and they're pretty dense. So if you have thoughts or questions that come up between now and then, please reach out or shoot us an email so that we can answer any questions, or kind of if you have ideas that you want to see explored. Welcome that. We have about 5 minutes if anybody wants to, if committee members want to make any closing comments. Randy?
I know at this moment, we are caught up in the moment, and I think there's some clear challenges that we have in terms of improving this organization. I know we've just took a good chunk of the time discussing how we tell the story of PCEF better in this organization, and I'm looking forward to the work that Megan will be providing for PCEF as a program. But I also just am looking forward, as we're ending with this note, to the future. I think there's a lot of exciting work and great lessons learned. And I think that's, again, a testament to the work of staff and, just the vision of how we continue to refine this program. And I just want to also, in extending this kudos to staff, just extending kudos to our committee. I don't think we've been perfect, but I will say that when we provided critical feedback or raised flags here and there, I think some of that's been reflected in the audit. So I'm not going to say that we are perfect in any way, but I do, when I look at who's on this committee, folks who have experience in construction, folks who are actual electricians, folks who are running programs or know the clean energy space really well. I'm proud of who's in here and how we try to hold staff accountable or balance staff. And I hope we continue to grow into this into this role and continue to hold this organization accountable, but also help grow this organization. So I'm really just proud of everyone in this work. I know we're going through some rough patches, and I think that should be expected for any growing organization. But I do feel like when we hand over the keys to the next cohort of committee members, we're going to work our hardest to make sure that we're creating something on solid footing for that next cohort. So I hope that you are all in it with me on the long haul on this one. But just wanted to at least extend, all that kudos and all that work that I think just doesn't always get recognized when we are going through those rough patches. So just want to extend that thank you to everyone.
Michael?
I'm a little slow on the unmute. I would like to continue on with what Ramfi's just said and add one more thing, which is I like to remember, this is the first time where we've held a lot of criticism. And the last time I remember when we held a lot of criticism was when we put out our first grant for the community to review, and our first grant application. And the community reviewed that and came back to us and we really kind of had to go back and start over, take a good hard look at what we had done wrong, and what we needed to improve and what we needed to change, without like ego, or trying to do it without ego, and set aside, and get over any feelings that we had, in order to put together an initial grant proposal that was equitable, fair, accessible, to PCEF priority communities. And we did that, so we are an organization that I think is very responsive to input from the community, and to input from other groups. I would also just like to say that, like, in these hard times, I do appreciate the committee for taking all this time, answering questions, doing interviews, addressing concerns, and all the work that staff's been putting in. I think staff has really been through the ringer on this, and you're doing amazing work. I don't know how you're doing it at the staffing level, so I am just constantly amazed with the amount of work, and the amount of stuff that you're getting done. So I want to thank you all for that. At the end of this and that's all. Thank you.
Sam, you want to close this out?
Just thank you. I don't think I can do any better than that. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to the committee. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you all.
Good night, you all.
Night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.